Yes, sir, we can start now.
There was a hand, sir?
There's something wrong with my camera. I won't be able to start my video. I tried, but I think this new laptop.
Okay.
Sir, it's all right.
See, you can see.
Yeah, but we want you to start the proceedings, and please welcome and make your introductory remarks, sir.
Okay, shall we start now?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay.
We can start. You can introduce the session and Professor Dinesh and start.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important session that we are having. And we recently, all of you must have read about this national monetization pipeline, which was announced. And a lot of debate, discussion going on, a lot of articles are being written. But this, it's much beyond the public sector assets, much beyond public assets, much beyond the economy, much beyond everything. It is a direct assault, indirect assault on India's democracy itself. Because I am a student of economics, I've also been closely following other things. Basically, this is a move towards moving India towards an autocracy. That means you have a oligarchy first, a strong oligarchy like we have in Russia. Once you have an oligarchy in place, there will be no shortage of money, fund flow. Majority of the people will be only surviving on their own bare existence, and whereas a set of people will be reveling in wealth. And with that help, by manipulating the electoral system, you can remain in power forever. Now you know what has happened in Russia. Vladimir Putin is a president for life. What happened in China? Xi Jinping is president for life. Now that is a kind of devious agenda. Let's not look at it only from the point of view of economics, public assets, or public sector. Much more devious. So when we are analyzing this matter, we have to look at these aspects also. Second point I would like to make is the whole concept of privatization of public sector and asset monetization is in gross violation of the constitutional principles. India is not a country of 1 crore or 2 crore, 3 crore, 5 crore or 10 crore people like we have in Europe, wealthy countries. This is a country of 135 crores, where only about 30 odd crore people are having some kind of economics, living a decent life, some kind of decent life. Rest, nearly 100 crore are living virtually hand to mouth. You have to have a welfare economy based on the government's interventions, and it cannot be a market economy. Now, this market economy is a total misnomer as far as India is concerned. I have been involved in this power sector reforms starting from the mid-90s. Direct confrontation with the people who are advocating market economy. India just cannot have a market economy, period. 30 to 40 crores will be able to enjoy the market economy. What about the 80, 90, 100 crore people? This is the second point that we must dwell on. Third point is all these public assets have been created by the taxpayers' money or several generations, starting from 1950s onwards. Now, this is asset belonging to the people of India, created out of the blood and toil of our forefathers, earlier generations. And with one stroke, they want to polish off 6 lakh crore worth in first installments, handing it out to God alone knows to whom. Quo warranto, a very important question. By what authority you are doing it? Quo warranto. Who has given you the authority? Who has given you the mandate? The last election, this party won only by 25% of the electorate votes. 75% did not vote for them. Where is the mandate? Third point. Fourth point is, out of these assets, almost entire values of the land these days. Land is very valuable. The entire land, almost the entire land was acquired from the people of India, particularly from peasants, at very low prices. I know, I have operated the Land Acquisition Act when I was in the service. And used to be, emergency clause used to be imposed because it is required for a public purpose. And land used to be taken, compensation was very meager, even that meager compensation was not given. It was the state governments. Land is the exclusive purview of the state governments, and the land was acquired or assigned by the state governments to the public sector. What right has the central government got to grab the entire property and then sell it off or alienate it? Have they consulted the state government? And final point, have they consulted the parliament? No, none of these have happened. And also, final point again, it's a very important point because I have managed public sector. Public sector is capable of as much efficiency as the private sector. I have worked in private sector also. I have this fortune of being in the public government, public sector and private sector. And public sector is as efficient, if not more efficient than private sector. And government of the day is only manager of these assets. They are not owners, they are managers. As managers, they are supposed to manage them efficiently. Have they tried to do that? If they are unable to do that, let them get lost and go. You can't sell your people's property. These are major issues. And also, there is also a devious way to sort of skew the regulatory system to see that this monetization takes place quickly. All these are very devious agenda, as I said earlier, to create an oligarchy, and through oligarchy eventually leading to the severe damage to the most precious asset that we have, democracy. With these observations, I would request the experts to give their views, and we must take it forward in a very vigorous and aggressive manner, because this agenda could prove the death knell of India as a democracy. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. I have finished.
Dinesh ji, you have to take over.
Okay, thank you, friends. Thank you, Dev Saham ji. You have that placed before us the political dimension of the implications that the national monetization pipeline has in store for the people of the country. Experts would actually deal with I'm sure, not only political aspects, but also economic aspects. But even when we're looking at the economic aspects, the important point of the debate has been that economization of the public infrastructure, which means monetary value only being placed on these assets, and the rest of the contributions of these assets are being discounted. That's the area which has been under discussion. Whenever any asset gets privatized, whenever any public sector has got privatized, we've seen such implications that how user charges can rise. It can impact finally on even the health of the asset itself. We can also miss buses with regard to technological change, the future orientation of technologies which keep happening. Like in energy, we've known that how the power sector has got impacted. And it's not just power sector. We've seen the impact on finally, even the banking sector through that. Of course, in this particular case, there are new financial instruments in making. Infrastructure investment trusts, real estate investment trusts, and many of these instruments actually are not just merely involved in economization, that is in marketization via, placing the merely valuation in terms of monetary terms, but also speculation. Many of these financial instruments actually are risk-based instruments. This mobilization of financing has severe implications because they create an imagination that's over. Many benefits might come to the people as far as is concerned, and meaning more infrastructure would be created, growth would be there, investment would be followed by jobs and so on, etc. Today, we have gathered to examine all these implications, the claims of the government. Those of you who have probably had a look at the 2-volume report of the Niti Aayog, with this preface written by Amitabh Kant, the Niti Aayog executive chairperson or director, I think. In that preface, Deshanji. Yeah, in that, if you look at, there are claims made, and how and why monetization should be treated as a great innovation, and how without selling, actually they claim that we are still going to generate revenue for the government, not for revitalization of the public sector by any means. Whether even the claim of new infrastructure would be created or not, for that also, I think we got to really imagine and discuss whether such thing would happen or not, whether there's an evidence. Of course, they're quoting a lot of evidence from Australia, United States, and Indonesia. If you read volume 1, it would give you an idea of what kind of financing instruments and the evidence that they have generated. There is also a small evidence given from India from the roadways. But the assets that are involved in this case are airports, seaports, road, power lines, oil and gas pipelines, railway lines, railway stations, a dedicated freight corridor, almost the whole infrastructure. And it is not a stock that is, once identified and the rest is safe. In fact, it's a flow. That's why it's called pipeline. Many more assets are going to be added over. They are asking, and since in many of these cases, the state government's assets also are going to be put into the sale, put into the process of monetization. I think there are a whole number of aspects which we need to understand, even from the economic dimensions, from the point of view of financing of it, the benefits and the costs, the damages which would have to be paid. They're talking of unlocking of value. What kind of value they think they would be able to unlock out of it? The kind of value that the public sector and this infrastructure has unlocked for the country in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and that's why this country is still alive. Otherwise, and by much of what we are alive on is precisely the contribution of the freedom movement's legacy in the plans which we created, the 5-year plans that I'm referring to, through which this public sector was created. Public sector assets were created as a part of the plan process and not through the process of market. And today, if this market, which is also of a speculative nature, this market is not an institution of the kind which we have known, regulated markets, but regulated markets under the welfare economy. The kind of the new mediations which we see in this case, the financial markets, the capital stock markets, the management consultancies, many of them are international. They are linked to, various kinds of corporations abroad. Financial investor, the finance capital is hugely involved in it. Accountancy firms are involved in it. the government institutions and various nodal organizations which are going to regulate the contracts or sign the contracts. These are all, and then of course, along with that, there's a media spectacle. Each time one or another assets, around which a contract is going to be signed, the benefits are going to be claimed. There's going to be a lot of lies which we can expect, but we will be told. But we can expose those lies. We can assess them in case we have the expertise within us. We have the competence within us. There are technical aspects. Huge number of technical. That's why we need experts' help. We are going to set up a People's Commission on National Monetization Pipeline and public sector privatization. We are wanting to today learn from the experts that what kind of points which we should keep in mind even while drafting the terms of reference. Hopefully, this particular webinar would provide us guidance on those very TORs. How should we deal with it? How do we actually mobilize expertise and public opinion as well as sensitize people? Our broad perspective is very clear that this particular monetization is going to ignore people's interests. Maybe we'll be able to stop it. Maybe we won't be able to stop it. But if we are even not able to stop it, we should be able to protect people's interests, and how we would be able to protect people's interests is what we want to learn from the experts here. We have a distinguished panel of experts here. Professor Chirashree Dasgupta from Jawaharlal Nehru University. She's written extensively on public sector and Indian economy. Professor Chirashree Dasgupta. We will have broadly for every speaker, and that's 12 minutes in the beginning. And we expect to have for every speaker 15 minutes. 3 minutes later for reply after you have heard other people, as well as the questions, and from the participants, various issues are likely to be raised. You will be coming back, each one would be coming back for another 3 minutes to respond. We have altogether 2 hours, and I hope, and in case, even if we want to take 15, 20 minutes more, that should not be a problem, I think so. We are going to have Chirashree Dasgupta, and after that, Shri Nagal Swami ji, when his turn comes. I know something about him, but I think Devsheim ji knows him for very, very long as far as he's concerned. He's a former principal accountant general, and I would like Devsheim ji to help, introduce him properly. And other speakers, some of them I know well, so I'll take help of others if I do not know somebody, and we will introduce them. So, Professor Chirashree Dasgupta, we'll start with.
Okay, thank you, Dinesh. I'm very grateful to Center for Financial Accountability and People First for giving me this opportunity to discuss with all of you the implications of the national monetization pipeline. And I'm particularly grateful to Priya, Dharshini and Anirban, who got in touch with me and spoke to me about being part of this today. Now, as you all know by now, that on 23rd August, the government announced through a press briefing that 6 lakh crores would be raised between 2022 and 2025 over a period of 4 years through the national monetization pipeline. And this entire plan is put forward in 2 volumes, as Dinesh said, and has been formulated largely by the Niti Aayog with consultations with line ministries. Now, if you see what is up for monetization, and I'll come to that misnomer a little later: roads, transport, highways, railways, power, pipeline and natural gas, civil aviation, ports and waterways, telecom, food and public distribution, mining, coal, housing and urban affairs. So the entire gamut of not only infrastructure, but also a range of services which were intended for some kind of as part of state welfare provisions like housing and food and public distribution has also been put up for monetization. Now, the aim ostensibly is to generate employment, growth, and integration of the rural and urban parts of the economy. And they've claimed that this will be done through what they call structured contractual partnerships with brownfield investment. And the reason they are doing it, they say, is because the private sector has resource efficiency and dynamism to adapt to a changing global scenario. And they're going to do this through setting up trusts, infrastructure investment trust and real estate investment trust. And basically, all of this essentially means that this is going to be sale of public assets over short period instead of privatization, which is a once and for sale. This is going to be sale over a short period, and that short period is initially 4 years, extendable up to 6 years in the case of the leases. So they will basically give out all these public assets on lease to various private parties. But what they have not told us is the extensive detail of assets, okay, and how they have arrived at valuations, a priori valuations. The second is they have not told us what are going to be the terms of contract, each lease contract, what is going to be the terms for that. Now, let us take up a few of these points one by one. Since we have only 12 minutes, I'm not going to go into a sector wise implication. But the first point, as was said by Devasyamji when he was introducing the session, that this idea that the private sector is inherently resource efficient and dynamic is completely flawed. It is flawed for many reasons, but I'll take up just two. The first is that when they say this, they're comparing the public sector to the private sector. It is always based on a comparison between the two, and hence the argument that the private sector is more efficient. Now, the point is this efficiency argument comes from an idea of uh, resource allocative efficiency in economics. And this allocative efficiency is supposed to be achieved at a point where all resources in the economy are used up. But as we know that capitalism by its very nature does not allow that. It does not allow that for two reasons. Because if all resources, including labor, were used up completely, that is, we reach a full employment scenario, in such a situation, the labor market would become very tight and wages would start rising, and this would be detrimental to the profit shares, and hence capitalism would never allow it, which is why we always have some amount of unemployment in the economy. So the very theoretical basis of the argument of efficiency is flawed. There are many other flaws, but there's no time to go into that in this short period. But this is one point that should be kept in mind, that it is based on a flawed argument of private sector dynamism and efficiency. The second point that I want to make is that it has not been specified whether the what will happen to this state, the state of infrastructure, after the period of contract is over. Will it be returned to the government? Will it be reinvested and given to the same private party, and then on what terms? So basically, if you read the two-volume report, it is essentially a very short term. it's it is basically a short term move to raise some resources anyhow, without really looking at the longer term consequences of what will happen to these uh, assets after the proposed period is over. The third is, if you look at it, why I call it short term and also very unproductive, is because over a 4-year period, if India's GDP remains constant, what it is now, in that scenario, it will contribute just 1% of GDP each year in these 4 years. And this is an underestimate because obviously the GDP will grow even if it is marginal. Okay. The second is that this is uh, about 4% of the budget, okay, over 4 years. And this that is also assuming that the budget is static. And so that is also an underestimate. So basically, the idea is to turn everything into a commodity, a principle that this government has followed right from its inception. And it's not only this government, as we know, since 1991, there have been several attempts at privatization, and most of the privatization bids of the Indian government has failed, okay, has miserably failed. And so, because they know that they're not going to be able to sell outright, which is why they've adopted this clever policy of monetization. Now, what are the implications? They've claimed that this is going to lead to employment and growth. But the first implication, contrary to their claim, is that there is going to be demand contraction in the economy at a time when the economy is already in a crisis of demand. So the first thing that will happen is, because this is for profit, because this is for be given to for profit organizations, the first thing that will rise are user charges on all public infrastructure. And especially if you look at things like housing, food, and public distribution, it is a matter of grave worry, apart from, of course, the basic infrastructure. So everything will become more expensive. So people will have less money in their coffers. So there'll be less disposable income, which will mean that they will not be able to spend as much as it is with the rising prices, with the price rise that we've seen in the last few years. Uh, there is already a pinch in people's pockets, and that will further increase. The second thing is that this will lead to an increase in profit margins, because more public assets are being given into private hands who will make profits from there. And that will mean that the share of wages will decline. It is a trend that has already started in the economy post 1991, that the share of profits is increasing at the cost of the share of wages. So I'll just give you one example, that in 1990, 66% of total value was wages and 34% went to profit. By 2018, it was completely the opposite, which is 34% only was the wage share, while the profit share had increased to 66%. Now it must be around 72%, and this will go up further. So there will be a redistribution in favor of profits, in favor of corporates through this channel. And this in a situation where, as you know, that about for every 10 rupees of value that is produced in this in the organized sector in India, in the organized manufacturing sector in India, just 18 paise goes to labor. Labor is virtually free in India. It is in this context that there will be further redistribution, okay, from where the share of profits will increase at the cost of wages. So all of this then implies, shows the very anti-democratic nature of the move. Okay? It is not only, so Prabhat Patnaik says that this is an attempt to turn everything into a commodity. And this attempt to turn everything into a commodity, because of the redistribution that it will bring about, is inherently anti-democratic. It is also anti-federalism, because there's been no consultation. Not only has the opposition not been consulted, that is parliament, but there's been no consultation with state governments, there's been no consultation with local bodies. And so what you have is a challenge. So it is in keeping with the trend of centralization that this government has come to, has made its policy. And the third is, there are also, when you give all your uh, uh, infrastructure into private hands, and in many cases you just cut them up in pieces and give it to different parties, there is also a security question that is associated with it. Now, if we see some examples from the past, since they have cited examples, we should also cite examples. The just to,
Chirashree, 1 minute, please.
yeah,
More we have for
okay,
you.
1 minute, yeah.
Yeah.
So the attempt at electricity privatization in UP in the early 2000s failed. The attempt of water privatization in Tamil Nadu failed. Banking people have already talked about. And the greatest example to learn from is the privatization of the railways in the UK, which then had to be reversed, and many of the railway lines had to be again nationalized. So the need of the time is build a strong opposition, and taking inspiration from the farmers' movement against privatization, we should all really find ways to stop this. And if we cannot stop this, the future is very grim. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chirashree. A number of important points have been made, and I think one of the points which I would like as a follow-up to be discussed by Nagal Swami ji, because he's been the former principal accountant general in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. And I would like that, what's the possibility of user charges when they grow? And if all the upfront payments which these companies have made and they are not able to recover and realize, what kind of failures we can expect? Because as an accounting exercise, even that is an important dimension, that we are handing over an asset to a party which might not be able to actually realize the stream of revenue which is expected. What all consequences can follow for the asset itself? Number two, what kind of consequences can follow for the exclusion of very many people who have every right to this infrastructure? This infrastructure was created as a public good. It's supposed to serve common good. I would like Nagal Swami ji to also include this dimension in his point of discussion as an important issue. To my mind, it is also there, because that's why I called it speculation. It's not merely an economization, not merely marketization, right? But markets which are really based on speculation. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity.
Now, let me introduce Nagalsamy, because people must know who is talking. Now, Nagalsamy is a very humble and simple man, but he is one of the experts in certain fields. I'll just say that. Basically, he's from the Indian Audit and Account Service. As Dinesh said, he was Principal Accountant General. That is one part. After that, he became a member of the Tamil Nadu Electricity Board. Now it is called TANGEDCO, one of the largest public sector units, state-controlled public sector units in the country. Then from there, he seamlessly moved on to the Tamil Nadu Electricity Regulatory Commission. So here is one man who has got three kinds of knowledges. One is accounting and auditing knowledge, on which Dinesh posed a question. Second, the utility perspective, the working of electricity board, TANGEDCO now, and also the working of the regulatory commission. So I am sure he will be able to contribute from these three perspectives. I would now request Mr. Nagalsamy to take over.
Thank you,
Please.
sir. This national monetization pipeline envisages the investment of about 111 lakh crores of funds for the next 4 years. This period of 4 years co-terminates with the NIP, and this out of 111 lakh crores, central government is going to spend only 43 lakh crores, and the rest is by the other state governments. Out of the 43 lakh crores, the national monetization pipeline is expected to generate about 6 lakh crores. If you look at the estimation of these assets, in all the sectors. It is very conservative, very much lower than the market rate and the actual rates prevalent at present. For example, in the roads, they have taken 6 crores per kilometer, whereas the national highways itself is spending more than 9 crores. If you look at the hydropower stations, hydropower by the National Hydropower Corporation, they are considering about, again, it is about 5.6 crores, 5.5 or 6 crores. Whereas the hydropower plants cost very high, ranging from 10 to 15 crores per megawatt. So if you look at all the estimations of all these assets, it is very much at the bottom level. And in this pipeline, there are 3 stakeholders. One is the government, both the central and the state government. But for the time being, they have excluded the state government. Only the government of India assets are now monetized. Second is the investor. Third one is the public, common public, who are going to be the users of these assets. The monetization says the assets which are locked, which are not generating any revenue, are to be monetized. This is the word that if you look at the meaning of the word monetization, it says it should be a non-generating assets, non-revenue generating assets. But whereas here, all these assets, either roads, railways, telecoms, or power sector, the transmission lines, or the power generating plants, all are generating revenues. And many of these assets are already in the hands of the private. For example, the toll gates in the national highways, already they are collecting revenue, collecting tolls from the users. But we have also seen how the private agencies manage these assets, either in the road transport, the other in the power sector also. And their motto is profit, maximize the profit, not only ordinary profit, maximize the profit. Whereas the government has a social responsibility of providing services at an affordable cost. For example, in Tamil Nadu, electricity board was running in profit till 2000, in spite of supplying free power to the farmers for the pump set connections. Due to the participation of the private agencies, the power plants which are set up by the private agencies, the electricity board started incurring losses. Some of the power plants, when the electricity board was collecting an average of 2 rupees 25 paise per unit, the cost of the private power was about 4 rupees 50 paise. Added to this, the capital cost of this power plant, particular power plant, was at 880. It also had set up a power plant of the same capacity of 200 megawatt, incurring about 3 crores megawatt. So you can imagine what is the profit, what is the capital profit they made out of this plant. Only 30% of the capital expenditure was borne by the developers, and the 70% is from the financial institutions, including the banks. So 30% is only about 250 crores, whereas in the plant, in the capital expenditure, the investor had already made 250 crores and the plant is free for them. In spite of, added to this cost was approved by the Central Electricity Authority, and the government agencies is very difficult to examine the account books of the private agencies, private investors, and it is difficult to refute their accounting details. That is how, and also it is a manipulation by the private agencies to get a higher profit, higher investment and higher profit. So this will certainly, it will help, it will be repeated in the other sectors also. The road sector at present, the toll rates itself is very high. The people are offended, people are opposing these rates. But once it is monetized and given to the agencies, the national monetization pipeline, this scheme is going to benefit only the few corporates which are dominating the. So ultimately, these corporates, they are going to, and also this scheme also provides funds from various agencies. That is how since I was asked to speak on the regulatory, these regulatory rights, the availability of funds for these corporates to take over these assets, to participate in the monetization of these core assets. They are going to borrow from various agencies. They have liberalized already. They have amended the Security Contract Act to provide for these agencies to borrow from the foreign portfolio investment funds, pension funds, insurance funds, and the sovereign wealth funds. In addition to they are also allowed to go for the public the share market. So ultimately, the fund is going to be from the banks and the financial institutions, right from the internal as well as the external sources. But the profit is going to be with the corporates. How the regulatory agencies, regulatory bodies have failed and are going to fail, and among the three stakeholders, only the investors are going to benefit out of this scheme. The ultimate sufferers are the users, who are all going to use these directly or indirectly, these assets. The RBI, you have seen how this has regulated the banking sector. Already the person who was responsible, who was leading the demonetization, is now heading the RBI. Already they have surrendered 1,76,000 crores to the government, the surplus funds from the RBI. And we have seen the privatization or the issue of the Lakshmi Vilas Bank in Tamil Nadu, which was negotiating with the DBS Bank of Singapore at the rate of 100 rupees per share, was given free to this DBS same bank by the RBI. So you can imagine how many thousand crores of money, the public money, has been handed over to the DBS in a platter. So how far we are going to expect the RBI to monitor these securities contract? How are they going to monitor the FDI coming into the country and the foreign portfolio investment funds? And how are they going to monitor the banking loans to these agencies or the corporates who are going to take over these assets? Coming to the second regulator, SEBI, again, they have amended recently this exercise of national monetization pipeline. It has not started now. The government has planned and they have started right from 2021 itself. They have already made some of the amendments in the existing acts. So these corporates are allowed to split to start this trust, investment, infrastructure investment trust, and the real estate investment trust, which are going to go into the market and tap the funds from various sources. How is this SEBI is going to monitor this, regulate this? We've already seen many companies which are overseen by the SEBI many companies have closed, and the investors' funds are.
Sorry, somebody is running a video on the screen. Sanju Baba or something. Please discontinue that.
Okay. Then, all right now?
Yeah, sir, that's fine, because I think that's only a photograph.
So coming to
Actually, the sound we are not able to hear as yet, so there's no disturbance now.
Okay. Coming to the power sector, they are going to, the assets, transmission assets and the generating assets are going to be monetized. For the present, they are going to monetize only the central government assets. So here the Power Grid Corporation of India's assets, which are interstate power lines, are going to be monetized. Already we have the Electricity Regulation, Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, and also Central Electricity Authority. The Regulatory Commission is fixing the tariff for the transmission lines, which can be used either by the government agencies or the private. So they go by the data given to the Regulatory Commission. If it is a government agencies, you cannot fudge the accounts. If it is a private agencies, God knows how far this is reliable. These data are, this informations, the accounts are reliable. In one of the tariff fixation, one private company had two generating company as well as the distribution company. Generating company will have 100% profit in their generation, sell it to the distribution company at a very high rate, and the distribution company will submit to the Regulatory Commission saying that this is our cost of power purchase and this is our cost of power distribution. So please allow us a very high tariff rate. So this is how the private agencies, the private companies or the corporates are going to provide the data, provide the accounts to the regulatory agencies, and going to get a very high tariff rate. These ultimate sufferers are the public users. And likewise, the generating companies also, they are going to monetize the hydel powers of the central government and the solar power units, the renewable energy source of solar power for monetization. Here, I don't know what are the reasons why the government of India is looking at only the hydel power stations instead of coal-based thermal power stations. But here, the lot of the assets involves the location of the power plants, the huge building setup, and the transmission lines. And there may be scope for the private players to make use of these assets for various purposes in addition to the power generation, and make the maximum profit. So this is about the generation, monetization. The other, the petroleum and the natural gas, They have the pipelines. These pipelines are also now it's going to be monetized. These pipelines, the Regulatory Commission, the Petroleum Natural Gas Regulatory Board, has the power to fix the tariff for taking the natural gas through these pipelines. They take into account the cost of the project, and the rate is fixed cost plus. The tariff is cost plus rate, and they will look at the total cost and what is the life of the pipeline. So this rate is fixed for the economic life of the pipelines. So it is a fixed rate, whereas now it is going to be revised depending upon the volume of the goods transported through these pipelines, and it is going to be a periodical revision. So again here, the users may mostly the industries and the domestic consumers, industrial consumers, and the power plants, they are going to sell out the very high price for these usages. So I think depending upon I don't want to take much time on this. Depending upon the field, the regulatory commissions have very limited um, uh, role to play, because it is in the hands of the government. Whatever government says, the regulatory commissions, because of the people who are not to be appointed or appointed in these regulatory agencies, and they toe the line of the government. Then, as Mr. Dinesh Abrol told about the monetization, how are they going to affect the common man, the users of these assets? We can take the example of many fields: the roads, the railways, the electricity, power lines, the gas lines, gas pipes. The government, which tried to disinvest in these assets, they failed in their attempt to do in the last few years. They could not corner the budgeted amount. Now they have taken a new route of this monetization, where these assets are pledged or they've handed over to these corporates for a longer time, longer period. Sometimes it is 25 years, sometimes it is 30 years. In some of the areas like the dedicated freight corridor, it is about 60 years. The 30 years is going to be renewed further for 30 years. So ultimately it is handed over to the private agencies. So this is only a jargon they used here, unlocking the assets, the national monetization pipeline. But it is ultimately it is kind of a temporary privatization. And how are they going to look after these assets? Like we have seen the road sector, the toll gates, though they are collecting the tolls, but they hardly redo the road laying, or they maintain the roads properly. In some of the cases in Tamil Nadu, we have seen the High Court, they have come to the rescue of the users, saying that you charge only 50% of the toll because you have not maintained the roads. So this is going to be the scenario once these assets are monetized. So I don't want to take more time. So at the end, I can, whatever the questions, I'm prepared to answer this. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Nagal Swami ji. Very many aspects, starting from valuation to regulation and regulatory failures that can occur. And finally, the impact on the users you have brought out, and we have advanced the understanding with we started with Chirashree ji. I think there are a number of issues which we need to discuss, and I'm sure Priya, it's now your turn to sort of share with us your understanding of what all implications this national monetization pipeline has. Before just Priya enters into discussion, let me just make a point that in the case of power sector, the discoms are already in losses, huge losses, and we have had to bail them out. The Uday scheme was launched. Finally, the failures that can occur, the risk that and the speculative instruments as they are involved, the kind of implication that would have finally for the health of the assets as well as the users, how they would be affected. I think these are very, very important dimensions. And finally, the tax citizens and themselves would have to pay both, like they're paying for telecom as well as for the discoms losses. And it's not corporates paying; it's really the people of this country. The taxes would increase, and less infrastructure and less jobs, and that's been the case anyway in the last so many years from 2000s onwards in particular. Priya, please start.
Oh, thank you, Professor. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
And yeah. So good evening, everyone, and thanks for your participation today. I think the speakers expands of what this particular national monetization pipeline entails, and also what has been its impact, like not necessarily for this particular project, but even before, or like the changes that has happened within the regulatory framework, or what has been the experience with various sectors earlier. So I would try to cover briefly on what are the expanse of this pipeline and also the impact that it is going to have on the people. So firstly, there are a few things that one needs to kind of reiterate to oneself and also establish at all levels, very clearly that this, as the government claims, that this is not a privatization drive, but this is a monetization. And this entire misnomer that Professor Chirashree was also pointing out, that this is effectively privatization, because these leases that are going to happen are not like an annual lease or like 2 years, but ones that would have like 30-year time period or 40-year time period, and effectively over a generation. So then once you cross a generation, things almost become norm. So then I think most of us won't even know what is going to happen around 50, 60 years down the line. So effectively, this is privatization of the public assets. And also this selling of like 70 years of whatever has been built, and without any discussion, and I think that part we can come to the next, but also the expanse of it. I think Professor Chirashree covered the various sectors, and that this is kind of brought in a very new term, like at least in the last few years, this entire monetization is something that is being sold, whether in terms of efficiency or like as the only solution to raise revenue. But this is something that has been there since the 90s. Like we saw the same selling of the bundled shares of the PSCs to the financial institutions, and thereby also to the stock market. And that came crashing down when the Harshad Mehta scam kind of came out. And we also saw the same thing happening in 2000, between the period of 2003 to 2008, which is seen as a credit boom, when all the markets were open, and most of them were also deregulated. So at that point of time, what was seen as like a leap and bound growth or progress kind of came crashing down once again when we had the 2008 financial crisis. So if we look at these historical times, the entire logic that, once you go into the market and it's going to self-regulate itself, and that private players have more efficiency, we do not have any historical backing, or we don't even have to go that far back. Currently, if we take the March 2021 data of the IBC, we have close to 4,376 companies that are in NCLT going in for resolution. And out of those, like there are only like close to 300 that have been resolved through the other resolution mechanism, while we have 1,277 companies which have just been liquidated. And even that liquidation, when it comes, the revenue raised by those liquidations, we know are very, very meager, given that most of it goes to haircuts. So even today, like the thing of saying that private sector is more efficient is something I think the previous speakers have also covered. And we know for a fact that that is not true. But despite that, we still have over and over again, even in this press conference that was where the NMP was announced, we heard the same arguments like efficiency or better utilization of your assets. So, and I think one also needs to say, I think more blatantly, where the government itself says that all the public sectors are inefficient. I mean, even though we have seen policy changes before, I don't know. Like, I think for me, at least, this is the first time that the government has repeatedly come out and say, like, we are useless and we want to give it to the private sector. And in this entire scenario, how do you locate the people? Like, I do not want to just say about impacts alone, but like, where are people located in this discussion? Because first, there was no discussion in the parliament. Like, so let alone the people, like even the people's representatives were not, taken into concern. And also, we hardly, very few news channels, and even in preparation for this meeting, like when we were discussing Professor Dinesh and Devasayam sir and Comrade Franco and all. So who are writing about against the facts of what a monetization entails? Very few actually looked at this very critically. So we hardly have that kind of a public debate. So we do not know whether people are informed. And when you have like certain media houses which are going to completely only look at the positive things or sell, like as Professor said, like basically sell life of there's going to be employment, there's going to be efficient utilization of your assets, there are going to be growth or GDP, whichever graph they try to produce. So in that context, then you have a public which is one confused or does not know what actually this thing entails. And even if you look at the guidelines or both the volumes, like you are only given like how many assets are going to be monetized and over which period of time. There is no talk about the regulations. There are no talk about like who is going to actually be in charge. Will that ever be discussed in the parliament? There is no accountability at any level, even within the debate. So then you have the people are like even far from this entire debate of monetization or privatization. And and the kind of assets that are being sold are these so-called brownfield assets, which Professor Chirashree said translates into your roads, your railways, the power, all of these things. And unlike before, when we had a phase, like it is like different phase of different kind of assault. At one point of time, it was through building large scale projects, and then at one point of time, it was about the capture of natural resources, and thereby like the movement for against land grab was where you only grab the land. And today it is like we grab the land, we built all of these. So now we are going to sell even what we have built. At one point of time, the understanding of private and why initially when they introduced tolls or when they introduced like charges for all these services, for the private, it was like they put the capital and they are the ones who built it, and hence they need those things. But today, what is happening through this monetization is that the government is the one which is going to invest in terms of building the infrastructure, because even in this monetization pipeline, what is said is like the money that they are going to, revenue that they are going to raise will go into the infrastructure projects. So, and these are again the same things that they are going to build. So the government will invest in, which is public money, will be invested in building these things. But then when it comes to the time of gaining anything out of it, that will be given off at a very cheaper price to the private, and they will be taking the profit. So this logic, and then how that impacts the people, because once again, when it comes to the roads, then definitely whether it's road, trains, or your railways, or airports, like then the cost of the fares and all of this is going to steeply increase. And when those increase, and also the allied or the other informal workers that those are associated, like even if you take our railway station, we have apart from the the Sarkari or other stalls that are there are so many people who would be selling food, selling tea, and all of them are dependent on that. But you hardly see that in an airport situation when it is completely sanitized, like this is for a particular class. And if the railway stations, we have like at least 400 stations that are going to be privatized, so then the same thing would happen to the railways, which I'm sure Comrade Langovan will talk in detail about it. But that is one of the like both rails and the road are seen as the people's transport, and both of it, when you are going to increase the fares, that is definitely going to impact the people. And even within the sectors, like though they promise employment every single time, and every single time we have seen that employment, there is not any steady or increase in the employment. And given the current situation, when you have job loss, and there is not going to be an employment opportunity there, like we saw it even in the banks, like where categorically the government said that we are not going to retrench employees, but they did not retrench employees for sure. But then even within a year before merging certain banks, they requested people to take voluntary retirement. So that is, it won't come under retirement, but definitely there's going to be loss of job even for those people who are working in this sector. And also the nature of employment is definitely going to change from a government thing to mostly going for a contract-based employment. And then within the private sector, you also have this backdrop of the labor laws changing, and then there is hardly going to be any social security for anyone who is working there. So it is not just like the common people are going to be affected, but it will also have an impact on the employees within the sector. And when we think about the privatization, like when we look at, it's important to also look at what would be the impact on gender, or the other marginalized section. Like one of the study that looked at top 300 listed companies found that the male to female ratio is 10:1. So, or worse, like 53% at least had like a 10:1 ratio, and only 39 out of the 300 companies actually disclosed that they even had people from historically marginalized section being their employees. And the worst hit are also people who are differently able, because over 70% of these companies had a 0 or less than 1% of differently able people as employees. So these are things that cannot be ensured once you have all of these sectors going to the private hands. And on the other one is also how do you locate it within the context of the pandemic, because already the government has used it to the best of its advantage. Like every time that there are any questions on the government, like it said, this is the pandemic, it's the hand of God, or and even for the NMP, they are saying like the only way of generating revenue, and as Professor Chirashree also pointed out, the generating revenue right now, it is a very short term very myopic way of looking at this entire thing. But while the justification of the pandemic is given from the government, it does not look at the impact of the pandemic on the people already. Like there has been huge number of, whether it is job loss or like the decimation of informal sectors, like due to the successive lockdowns that has happened, or the payment due to how many of them have almost become bankrupt just because they could not pay medical bills. And if we are locating like how within a disaster that a private sector would kind of function, like Comrade Franco always uses this analogy of how during the Gulf War it was the Indian Airlines which airlifted a lot of people. So, but within the pandemic, we saw that the profit rates of many companies actually went up, and there is a huge gap in like the inequality gap has actually risen during this. And rightly, Professor Chirashree pointed out that that also directly is proportional to the kind of, actually indirectly proportional to the wage. So we know where this profit is actually coming from, directly from the wages of the laborers. So if we are going to look at this scenario as what is going to be our future of every single public sector is going to be privatized. And as Professor Dinesh pointed out, this is a pipeline. So you will have more and more sectors that are added into it. And that cumulative impact on the people, when you already have an economy that is contracting, when you already have a huge job loss, when you already have many informal sector which actually could take in a lot of labor that is completely decimated, then what would be the cumulative impact on the people and thereby also the economy? So so in within this, then do we not have any alternatives? So because on one hand, like when the government repeatedly says, and this is not just the government, because we have heard it again, and since it is almost like a culmination of the entire neoliberal new economic policy changes that has happened for the last 30 years, that everything is privatized. And within a context like as Mr. Nagal Swami also pointed out, with no regulation. So we are in the time of ease of doing business. So the framework is that we are going to ease make it easy for the businesses. And also the fundamental thing is that which is being told to the government repeatedly, that you are trying to find solutions. You're trying to find a supply side solution for a demand side problem, and that is going to have an impact in the future economically and on the people. So then do we not rethink about wealth distribution? Do we not like when you know for a fact that there are private companies that are not even all of the companies, but you have this top 1% that is whose profit has grown leaps and bounds, then do we not think about wealth distribution? Do we not think about taxing the rich? So these are debates that one needs to, I think, also include in the People's Commission that that will come, and also take to the, take it to the people that this is going to be the impact. Because otherwise, when you talk about brownfield assets, or the language itself is kept so that it is delinked from what the people are going to relate to, and especially when it is not discussed in the parliament and it comes directly from Niti Aayog and then it is like implemented, then it is the responsibility of us to kind of deconstruct or like demystify these words, and then say like, no, this is basically putting more tolls on your road, and this is basically increasing your train fares, and this is basically losing out your job and livelihood. And then what do we look in terms of the regulations? Because even in the current scenario, we hardly have any safeguard policies. Yeah, I am just concluding. This is my final point. So we hardly have any safeguards. So when you look at the private companies, then who would regulate these investments that they are going to make, and whether that would be again clearly a pro-profit thing? So then once again, how are we going to look at the people? So these are some of the questions I think we need to discuss, and it is very important to oppose this national monetization pipeline, because this is also the beginning of something that a very different kind of structure that is being imposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Comrade Priya. Thank you very much. You pointed out the undemocratic way this whole decision is being taken and is going to be implemented. You also brought out that there are alternatives, and one of the alternatives that you referred to is that why not tax the rich? Certainly, I think there is a need for that too, and should be done. And this has been a call from several economists over the period, particularly during the pandemic period. But even within the framework of other measures, which are other than the taxation, can't the public sector really develop, let us say, assets whose value has gone up, let's say because of metros, the land nearby, the railway stations. In many cases, if there was in public sector, lot of non-user charges based revenue stream could have also come up. In fact, we could have taken advantage of that, and as a result, the operation and maintenance expenses, which are in many cases growing, could have been supplemented, and we need not have increased the burden on the people. And that's what the Delhi, all the metros, in fact, are in losses, huge losses as far as it's concerned at the moment. And the idea is that why should not have been the rights given to the public sector, the DMRC and others related. And I think, to develop those very assets whose prices can go up, etc. And there is a very little attempt on that front as well. So there are a number of options in terms of alternatives that without increasing the burden, but still really making break even for these particular assets, those alternatives to be also explored. Comrade Alan Govan from the Deru Railways Union, from the Dakshin Eastern Railways Union, Comrade Alan Govan is with us. Comrade, your sector is going to generate the maximum amount of monetary, value for the Niti Aayog and the government as far as it's concerned. So please tell us, how you see the impact and how you see the challenge. Yeah.
Comrades, thank you very much. First of all, I want to say that the national monetization scheme is for infrastructure areas. But government has another plan for monetization for CPSEs also, Central Public Sector Enterprises. So that also they will unleash. Now we are talking about national monetization of infrastructure area. Actually, I will deal with I will raise some questions which has to be thought out publicly. What I want to say is this national monetization plan or pipeline has been linked to the national infrastructure pipeline. National infrastructure pipeline was announced in the year 2019 in the Independence Day. Then they published task force, published the Niti Aayog task force published the national infrastructure pipeline, which is 102 lakh crore investment. And now they say it is 111 lakh crore. Okay. So 102 lakh crore is the national infrastructure pipeline, in which they said some investment will come, or it will be invested by the center, some will be by the state, some will be by private. Now, I will come to the railways. Railways, they told out of the 102 lakh crore, 13.69 lakh crore will be invested in railways. out of which 87% investment will be by the center. Only 12% from private, 1% from state. This was the plan, National Infrastructure Pipeline. I made a study about it. In 2019-20, according to the National Infrastructure Pipeline, out of 13.69 lakh crores, 2019-20, 1,33,232 crores have been invested. But in which 1,13,911 crores should come from the center. That is 87% of NIP. But budgetary support was only 68,000 crores. In 2021, 2,62,510 crores was to be invested, and out of which 2,28,383, 87% should be invested by the railway, central government. But they invested only 29,000 crores. 21-22, according to the National Infrastructure Pipeline, 3,09,360 crores should have been invested, out of which the center share is 1,87,100 crores. But railway invested, government invested, or as invested this year, only 1,07,000 crores. That too is not a reliable figure. So the infrastructure pipeline, in which central government has to invest 87% of amount investment, has not taken place. Now they have changed the goal. Now they say they are going to introduce a national railway plan from 22-25. So they have abandoned 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25. Now this national monetization plan talks about 22, 23, 21, 22, 23, 24, 24, 25. So 4 years they talk. And in this, 12% has to come from the private. That is, 12% of 13.69 lakhs is 1.60 lakhs. That is what now they say 1,52,000 crores will be mobilized through monetization from the private sector. And I will tell you, this 1,02,000 crores, they say, out of which 50% is to come from station development. That is monetization of station. They want to monetize 400 stations. Let us study the impact of the stations. The 400 stations, 40 stations in 22, 23, 120, 24, 120, 25, 120, total 400 stations. So out of these 40 stations, 21, 22. Now 21 is going to end. Now they say in 21, 22, 17,000 crores will be mobilized. 23, 29,000 crores. So altogether, 76,250 crores will be mobilized through monetization during these 4 years. Let us examine the experience of the railways. These 400 stations are A1 and A class stations, where more than 20 crore transaction is there. These stations were first listed in 2014 for privatization. Then they listed only 50 stations. Then they gave tender only for 27 stations. And out of the 27 stations, nobody came. Only Habibganj near Gopal has been taken over by a private party. And no other station has come up. What they want, private want is, they got the commercialization of land, all is there. But they don't want platform ticket. They want the number of years was 45 years. They want 99 years. They have agreed. Even then, they are not coming because they are telling platform ticket sales should be given to them. But railway is not allowing platform ticket sales to them. The ticketing is with the government, railway. So if they accept for platform ticket sale also, they will probably they may come. So this is the position. So in this situation, 22 in 22 40 station, 23 120 station, 24 120 station, 25 120 station is a myth. Second, I will, and this 76,000 crore is the 50% of the 1,52,000 crore they want to monetize. So this station monetization will definitely fail if they come to lesser terms, then they may come. So for that, railway should, and what railway will earn is only premium charges. So premium charges for first, that is in advance, they have to pay something. That amount only will come, not the 76,250 crores. Second point is this passenger trains. Let us examine passenger trains. They for the National Infrastructure Pipeline says by 2025, 500 passenger trains should be privatized. And to start with, by 22 March, 150 trains should be privatized. And they also told 30% of the freight trains should be privatized. Now, this out of these 150 trains, they gave 12 clusters: Bombay 1 and 2, Delhi 1 and 2, Howrah, Mumbai 1 and 2, and Chennai, Jaipur, like that. Bangalore, Hyderabad. So 12 clusters they took. These 12 clusters, they announced a tender. They announced tender. But what happened on 23 July, tender was opened. It was postponed. Finally, they opened tender. And they, based on the revenue share they quote, the tender will be given to them. The private, but for 12 clusters, nobody came except for 3 clusters: Mumbai 2, Delhi 1, Delhi 2. Even for this, only IRCTC quoted more revenue share. For example, IRCTC quoted for Mumbai 2 18% revenue share, whereas there is Delhi 1 and 2, in Mumbai 2 only IRCTC, Delhi 1 and 2, one company called Mega Engineering and Infrastructure Limited also quoted revenue share. That share is IRCTC quoted 15.3%, he quoted 2.16%. Delhi 2, IRCTC quoted 6.3%, Mega Engineering quoted 0.5%. They don't want revenue share to be given by the private parties. They want lesser time. They are this concession period is 35 years. They don't want it. They want lesser time. So this only when they agree, this will take place. So revenue share, if there is no revenue share, if they don't want to give revenue share, there is no necessity for railway to give it to the private. So no income will be coming to the railway except the tracks access charge, that is haulage charge. So in this situation, only 29 pairs of trains out of 150, 29 pairs of trains, that too IRCTC, Railways Public Sector, has taken over. So in this situation, what they have decided in the national monetary plan, they say they have reduced to 500 to 150, 150 to 90 now. They say 60% of the 150 trains will be privatized within these 3 years, 23, 24, 25. So this is this is what they have told. So here also, what problem is there is the passenger trains. They have, of course, they have their own right to. They should have the right to have their own fares. But even then, they are not forthcoming because passenger segment is always loss making. If passenger segment is loss making, if they come, what happens? IRCTC ran 2 trains from Delhi to Mumbai, Mumbai to Ahmedabad, Mumbai to Delhi, Delhi, Lucknow to Delhi. These 2 trains they ran. They had to stop the train because the fare was higher, occupation was less. So if the fare is higher, people will boycott. What they want, private flows want, there should not be any other train between before and after 1 hour from any terminal. That also they have accepted. Even then they are not coming. So this is the position. In this situation, how 90 trains should be privatized is a question. So in this, this is the practical point of view I am facing. So see, that is why the infrastructure they have, they are not investing what the infrastructure is needed to be invested in railways. They are abandoning investment in railways, and they are the aim is if privatized, you won't have safe, fast, and at affordable rates. This is the policy of the British Railway, and that policy will be given a go by. That is why this and another point I want to raise. That is, they say in the monetization plan, all no greenfield investment. That is, they are not going to invest and invest in rail track rail structuring, track construction, and run the rail. They already constructed rail they want to run. What the British Railway experience, now what the potential says, the asset monetization potential says, all the passenger trains should be open for monetization. 13,160 trains should be open for monetization. Stations, all 7,325 stations are open for asset monetization. All the 7,956 track kilometers, route kilometers are open for monetization. Good sheds, 1,246 open for monetization. Entire dedicated freight corridor, 2,840 kilometers is open for monetization. So they are not going to stop with that. They are going to run the entire railway into asset monetization. This is their plan. So in this situation, I also want to say one more point. That is, they say the brownfield investment, the investment that comes to railways from the brownfield will be invested in the green field. That is the new infrastructure. This is a myth, I will say. So this monetization plan is a bogus plan. It is a myth. If it has to be taken place, they will have to surrender everything to the private. If they surrender everything to private, we have to oppose it totally. With this, I conclude.
Thank you. In the very preface, Comrade Ramalingam L. Pawan of the volume 1 of NMP, the National Monetization Pipeline, Amitabh Kant mentions that risk appetite of the private investors has gone down. They are actually handing over these brownfield investments in order to precisely boost up their profit. They say it's so. So only if we are able to get some upfront revenue from this brownfield assets monetization, maybe we would be able to create what, new infrastructure, the greenfield investment, which is called capital recycling. So if this capital assets recycling is what they are saying is the rationale for this particular investment. So they haven't had so far in the case of railways. That's why the investments did not follow. And I think the failures are very much also possible. At the same time, people would be paying the price. The burden would be transferred to them in many, many ways. And I think we'll discuss that more. I'm going to invite Dr. Sharat Kumar, old friend from and has been advisor to the Department of Public Enterprises. Department of Public Enterprises was once upon a time an independent department. And I think his status has changed subsequently. Of course, he's retired. Dr. Sharat Kumar, he's been working with the Planning Commission and various other institutions for very, very long. And experienced person who's written on public sector. You can see his articles on the internet. So, Dr. Sharat, I invite you to share with us your perspective. And I asked you to be the last speaker because I thought you would hear others and then bring to us the perspectives that on the basis of your experience and expertise, which need to be shared with us and public.
Thank you, Dinesh. And I must express my gratefulness to the People's First for giving me this opportunity. Now, I am sympathetic to the views expressed already by other panelists, but what I see foremost, what is in the environment is the confusion and the hype around the confusion, because informations, the correct kind of an information is not being made available. So, in fact, what I must say at the outset itself, that certainly this monetization word is a misnomer. At the same time, I also feel it is neither privatization. Now, in order to explain my point, I felt, well, let me explain it in order. And instead of speaking, but I thought that let me read from a prepared text. And in fact, these are in bullet points. And naturally, I would come one after the other. They are interlinked. And I would certainly like that, well, you should allow me time to finish my paper.
Go ahead, no issue. Please take, we'll be able to give you 2-3 minutes more. Yeah.
So as it was just now observed, this national monetization pipeline ought to be looked at in conjunction with the national infrastructure pipeline, both of which form part of the Union Budget 21-22. Now, investment in infrastructure is a crying need. It does not matter which party is in power. Why I say so is, it is key to national competitiveness as it brings down the cost per unit of output. I mean, if we are wanting to be a global player, we have to reduce the cost of production of whatever we manufacture or produce. And here the investment in infrastructure can contribute greatly. Now, the next point is, according to one estimate, India needs to spend 7% of its GDP for infrastructure development. So far, the investment has been in the range of 4 to 5% of GDP. Now, on a GDP of rupees 200 lakh crore, the 7% investment in infrastructure works out to rupees 14 lakh crore. Against this amount, the so-called national monetization pipeline can at best fetch rupees 1.5 lakh crore in a single year. Now, where do we get the balance 12.5 lakh crore? Around, now here I'll give you the estimation which was also mentioned by some other panelists. Around rupees 2 lakh crore is expected to come from the budgetary support to infrastructure projects by the central government, especially for road construction. And I may mention here that there is already infrastructure and road cess, which fetches the government 1.2 lakh crores. So in this budget also some figure like 1.4 lakh crore has been allocated for development of roads. In fact, roads have become the priority as far as this budget is concerned. Now another rupees 2 lakh crore is expected to come as budgetary support for infrastructure projects by the state governments. So now we go up to 4 lakh crores. Now rupees 1 lakh crore is expected to come from investment by the CPSEs. So we move to 5 lakh crores. And yet another 2 lakh crore, 2 lakh crore is expected to come from the private sector. So now we go up to 7 lakh crore. But still there remains therefore a shortfall of rupees 7 lakh crore, because the 7% to GDP is 14 lakh crores. So according to the Asian Development Bank also, there is an infrastructure deficit as far as investment by India is concerned, and this works out to somewhere around 4% of GDP. So now we have to recognize this problem of a big deficit in infrastructure investment is there. So the problem, or where is the problem? The problem is that of infrastructure financing. I may list out the main sources of infrastructure financing besides budgetary support, which are banks, non-banking financial corporations, pension and insurance funds, long-term bonds, capital raised through stock market, public-private partnership, securitization of assets, and monetization. Now what has happened is the report on the national monetization pipeline prepared by the Niti Aayog discusses all the 8 sources of finances. However, it has mixed up, in my opinion, the last 3. There is a big confusion and overlap as far as public-private partnership is concerned, securitization of assets is concerned, and monetization is concerned. Now these points will become clear as we move further. Now let us examine first the PPP model, the public-private partnership. Now here the PPP projects again may be divided into 2 categories, those for the social sector and those for the infrastructure sector. In the former case, that means in the case of social sector, the government outsources its functions to a private agency, whether it is education or health, and meets full expenditure of the cost incurred on the social services, the full cost. But why should the government go for this particular arrangement? Because the government saves money through getting the jobs done more cheaply than if the government had it in-house. So there is a justification for public-private partnership in the social sector, but the government fully finances it. Now we come to the PPP in the infrastructure sector. Now here, why the confusion has arisen. PPP in the infrastructure is just the opposite of social sector. Here, all the cost of infrastructure is to be borne by the private players, the infrastructure developer, and the government merely leases out its asset, whether it is airport, port, or roads, for a given period. Once the developer has recovered its cost of developing the infrastructure, the land along with the infrastructure returns to the government. So as far as the PP is concerned, there are 2-3 things very important. One is that there is a contract, a concession for a given period. There is a stated objective and there is a monitoring. If they don't abide by these criteria, the thing is that the agreement is terminated. So it's very severe, and so that has to be borne in mind. Now, what has happened in the case of India? For instance, in the case of NHI, my reading is that there was a very poor response from the private sector, as it was being mentioned by Mr. Ellen Govan also in the case of railways. The government came forward with viability gap funding to mitigate the likely risk of poor returns for the private sector. And these are very big viability gaps, 40% of as grant, etc., etc. There was some successes after this viability grant was being given to the private parties, but that was not good enough to meet the targets. Now this is the problem. They could not, you see, allure the private sector to come for the public-private, you see, sector. So, perforce, the NHI had to build these infrastructure projects, meeting the full cost of the project. Now, this particular PPP so-called project was not a PPP project. It became a government project, but still those fine roads were created, and the government could recover the cost through toll charges on these roads over a period of time. You see, the advantage of these toll roads are designed in such a way that the people are able to reduce, the commuters are able to reduce the cost of travel. There is a saving on petrol, there is a saving on time. And whatever toll charges are there, they are less than what you would have incurred on petrol. So therefore, it is a win-win situation. It is a win-win situation for the commuters. It is a win-win situation for the person managing the PPP project. And you can recover the particular cost in certain time. For instance, this Noida toll road, they were expecting to recover the money in 10 years, but they could recover in 5 years. So it has now no charges are there. Now what has happened? What is the Niti Aayog doing here? They want upfront money. How will they get it? So what has happened is, instead of managing and running the toll road, what they are doing is they are going for auction the operation and management of the design toll roads to the highest bidder and recover the costs upfront for investing in new infrastructure projects. That is the kind of an approach. They auction it. If they succeed in that, they give it to the highest bidder, recover the money upfront, and then they have money with them to invest somewhere else. Now, this is because there is an acute, you see, problem of funding the infrastructure projects. And we are far behind as far as development of infrastructure in the country is concerned. Now, still what we see is that even if when the government has got the upfront money, on completion of the agreed lease period, the toll road would revert to the government. As such, these are not cases of monetization, which is nothing other than outright sale. It is not a case of outright sale. So it is not monetization. It is a case, simple and pure, that of public-private partnership. This is one thing which I want to make it clear. Now, next. The next issue, which again has not been discussed in these 2 volumes of the Niti Aayog, they do mention at one place very marginally, when this should have been discussed very clearly and threadbare, that is an alternative approach to raise finances is securitization of assets. Now, this is what they intend to do as far as the railways are also concerned. Now, here what happens? When you discuss about this securitization of assets as a source of funding, now let us consider the various towers of MTNL and Power Grid Corporation. These have become attractive to the mobile telephone companies as they can make use of these towers for their telecommunication purposes. Under securitization of assets, MTNL and Power Grid may form special purpose vehicles and transfer these towers, claim on these towers in return for an equivalent amount for the transferred assets. The SPV in turn securitizes the assets in units of say rupees 1 lakh. These are issued by way of IPO in the stock exchanges, where the investors buy these units knowing fully well that they will have an assured returns. perhaps much higher than they can earn from parking their money in the banks. This is what is the case of Power Grid and National Highway Authority of India. And once again, this is not monetization of assets. It is the case of securitization. Again, monetization word is therefore simply misnomer, and the securitization of assets was not well discussed, has not been discussed in the two reports of the Niti Aayog. Now, the next worry which I find is in everybody's mind is, if one wants to know the management control of these SPVs, or what they call as, let us suppose, infrastructure investment trust, the only objection from my side is that the infrastructure investment trust, in fact, for instance, NHI has several toll projects or PPP projects. Instead of giving to separate persons, they are putting them all in one basket, and a big player only can come and really take control of this, which I find not very comfortable as far as that is concerned. But at the same time, if we look at what has happened in the case of Power Grid and National Highway Authority, the SPVs remain under the management of the parent, organization, the parent CPSE, and therefore, and they function more like subsidiaries companies. Therefore, these are neither the case of privatization. This is the point which I want to make. These are not a case of privatization, because the SPVs, wherever they have materialized, they continue to work as subsidiary companies of the CPSE. Now, the interesting point which I would like to share by way of conclusion, and which is very interesting, the report of the Niti Aayog observes that there is a dearth of infrastructure companies in India, which has also handicapped the development of infrastructure in the country. The way out suggested, they say, is joint ventures. Joint ventures model with internationally recognized infrastructure companies. And here, what they say, that the CPSEs can play a very important role as GV partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharat. A number of points I think you have drawn attention to, and I'm sure there are dimensions which people would like to raise and discuss. I myself have two dimensions which I want to raise, but before that, I think we should give time to friends who have joined us as participants. They are as important participants. So in fact, the questions which have been put in the chat box are not too many, except there was a compliment that it's been a very informative thing. Ashish, are there questions apart from that? Do we know any that questions which we need to handle?
No, sir, we don't have any.
We don't have. So I think, but maybe then a couple of points should be allowed, even people not using text, but themselves here intervening and making interjections. Those who are interested to interject and raise from their side areas of concern or differences or divergences, I think we should keep space for that. Dev Saimji has raised his hand. Dev Saimji, yes, please start so that we can make best use of the time that is available to us.
I have a question to Mr. Sharat Kumar. He perhaps ended it very abruptly. He was coming out with a very good arguments and infrastructure development, but he ended it with a very abruptly. What is this monetization they are talking about? Talking about the 6 lakh crores. And what is the 6 lakh crores? At the end of the day, I have not been able to understand what is the concept. What are they going to do? Now, Professor Chirashree mentioned about 4 years, 6 years. Normally, a concession is, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. Now, I am myself totally, though I am a student of economics, I am completely confused about this concept of monetization. Since you have dealt with the public enterprises, I would request you clarify because you ended it a bit abruptly. Can you throw light as to what exactly are they trying to achieve? And at the end of the day, who is going to benefit? Because you mentioned some figures that even in spite of the best effort, they are unable to really kind of raise the kind of funds. In what way the monetization is going to raise the funds? In what way the monetization is going to develop greenfield infrastructure? Will you please be able to clarify that a bit?
Sir, I'll request Sharat to wait because I think there are a few questions which I'm expecting from others as well. Then Sharat can take up collectively all those queries and concerns. Any other friend who wants to raise a question so that not only to Sharat but to even other speakers, Nagalji, Chirashree, Priya, Ellen Govan. Yeah, please come up with your questions, sir. Any people who are interested to intervene, welcome, please. Yeah, Kananji, yes, please. Kananji, unmute yourself. Kananji, unmute yourself. Neil Megan, Kanan, yes. Kanan, you have unmuted yourself now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. The dignitaries are given in-depth coverage to this monetization plan. One thing I would like to raise this in this forum, sir. What the thing is, what is the cost what is the expenses they are going to make before they implement it for this taxation plan? Because in the case of merger of banks, what they have done in the last 2 years now, earlier there were 21 banks, now they are merged into 12 banks. They have spent the enormous amount, more than 15,000 crores they have spent, as per our study says. No bank knows what the merger expenses they have done. Even State Bank of India doesn't know what is the merger cost. All banks don't know. They have no technology accounting also. Why there is no government audit for that? RBI is audits, but RBI itself claims of policies. They don't. There is fund. They themselves audit banks. So CNIT audit. They should audit whether the merger expenses are correct. Then they will go. Even for this proposed recommend that they have started doing lot of expenses. Whose money? Public money. During the year 2020-21, exact expenses by the public sector banks is 2,02,000 crores. Out of that, 59% goes to soft cost, salaries and else. Under other expenses, they have spent 35,000 crores. That is next to the operating staff cost. Earlier, it was only next to the rent and other charges like that. Now, rent has only 8%. These other expenses, they have gone into 18%. All the unclassified debts, they see what they are allowed to do merger. They have done all expenses under other expenses, all unclassified debts, no housing, no auditing, nothing good. Or they audit, create audit whether the voucher is there, basically. So for this also, what is the accounting part? As Madam said, and this also 7% GDP we have to spend on infrastructure. But already under CRR 4% and 18% SLR, government public sector banks alone they have invested 34 lakhs crores in government investments. Actually, as per SLR, 25 lakhs crores is enough. They have made extra 10 lakhs crores. Already they have invested into the government investments only they are doing. They are getting very lesser interest on 6.3% only they are getting from the investments. How could they earn profit? That accounting part I would like to request. Yes,
sure. Thank you, Kanan. Now, important point with regard to the way the Basel norms have been taken up in the case of banking. Coming really around to the, and implications are there very rightly, the way the financing models, and Kanan is right, for when finance is mobilized, implications will be there. So, but I think Sridhar is there. Sridhar, you are still around with us? Sridhar,
yeah.
Yeah, Sridhar, you add before Sharat comes back, and Sridhar has a difference with Sharat ji also. Please bring it up, Sridhar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dinesh ji. One is, I am not very convinced when Sharat ji says that toll roads are win-win, because there are huge equity issues. At the end of the day, it's like a regressive tax. The poor end up paying for all the costly roads. What we have found with ILFS itself is 90,000 crores of public debt, which we are burdened with. But my more fundamental this thing about it is this whole thing of monetization, or the word spin that this government has brought in. One is that, like unlike any other party, this party is a right-wing businessman party. So we should expect that it should be doing this kind of things, and we should be careful that it'll do that in greater kind of force. The other concern that I'm having of late is, earlier we used to talk about crony capitalism, but slowly it looks like crony politics, because like we found with the coal auctions, it was KPMG which was telling the coal ministry what is to be done, even though we raised the question of conflict of interest, where they were also advising private companies. So even in this case, we don't know how much of it is the hand of the industry. And also, like others pointed out, like Ilongon pointed out, essentially they want to give it at no cost for 99 years or no lease of that kind. So I think there is a very strong reason to fundamentally dismiss this whole idea. The only kind of redeeming feature is, even now, nobody is willing to take the assets that we are seeing, right from Air India to BPCL to several others. And perhaps this is also time when our public sector, people manning the public sector can demonstrate, how better they are. Because this, like Priya said, the efficiency of private sector is a myth, and probably as a collective we should show how, ever since this liberalization, it's public money that has been pumped into private sector, and private sector is the most inefficient of all the sectors of the economy. Thank you.
Yes, Sridhar, this point needs to be actually taken up again in our session, that how private sector is not efficient, it's inefficient. There are so many actually possibilities of confirming that through evidence that is already there with us. But before I really come to that issue, Jagdeep Chokhaji, Jagdeep ji, is he? He's around. I see him. He's not muted also. Whether he would like to raise any issue at this moment, Jagdeep ji?
Sir, his audio is not connected.
Okay. Because ADR is the founder of that, so I would have really liked him to intervene on also the political dimension as well. But I think before Sharat is invited, because he has a set of direct questions too, and divergences or differences which have been expressed by friends here, I think I'll take a round in the closing, because we had promised in the beginning itself that 2 minutes or 3 minutes maximum we would be able to take for every speaker in the second round. So let me start with Professor Chirashree Dasgupta. Chirashree, and take your 3 minutes, and we'll go in the same order, and then Nagalji, Swamiji, Chirashree.
Okay, I don't have much to say, except to clarify one point which has come up in the discussion, that this thing that I mentioned, the lease of 4 to 6 years. So if you go through volume 1 of the 2-volume document, you'll find that they've listed out a few sectors for long-term lease. Apart from that, the rest, according to the press release, is for short-term lease. So it's like a staggered system of lease. So most sectors at the moment are up for short-term lease, except for a few like railways, telecom, etc., which they've listed for long-term lease. That's all that I want to say. Thank you.
No, yeah, Chirashree, that's an important clarification, because there are 3 types of models that they have put on. That is contractual, arrangements that and then structured financing, and then the PPPs. In that, the long-term leases are also very much there. And all the 3 models for monetization that they're going to use have different durations of leases at the core. So, Nagal Swami ji, please. Yeah.
1 minute, Dinesh ji, 1 minute. She made a very important point during the presentation. The labor profit ratio. This is a very critical point I think we must develop. Now, because if this monetization goes through, as it is, India is the second most inequitable country in the world. And it is growing every day. Now, will you please elaborate a bit on this so that we can build upon this for later?
Chirashree, please do that.
Thank you for that question. Now, I'll just give you a couple of figures to start with. That in 1990, just before liberalization, for every 10 rupees of value that was created in the economy, 65 paisa used to go to labor. And today, and this is all at current value. And so you know the value of 65 paisa today is not the value of 65 paisa in the 1990s that had more value. Today that has come down to 18 paisa, that for every 10 rupees of value that is created in the economy, just 18 paisa goes to labor. And that is why I said labor is virtually free. So now with this, the second set of numbers that I want to give to you is that the entire, as Priyadarshini also said, that the entire sort of accumulation model on which the Indian economy has been growing and is that the corporates are making profit not through, let us say, competing on technology or through increasing market access or different kinds of ways in which are normally talked about. What they are doing is simply that they are suppressing and compressing the share of wages in the economy, and that is where the entire profit share is coming from. So, which is why I was citing that other number, which is that once again in 1990, of the total value created in the economy, 66% used to go for wages and 34% used to go for profits. Now it is completely reversed. As per the latest figures from a couple of years ago, the share of profits is 66%, and the share of wages is 34%. And if you look at the entire, like I can't show you the graph, I don't have it ready here, but for this entire period, we have seen a geometrical rise in the profit share and either stagnancy or fall in the wage share, which only shows that the entire neoliberal regime has been based on sort of a redistribution from wages to profits, and that has been the basis of this accumulation regime. Now, within this, if we locate the national monetization pipeline, it is yet another way of basically wage suppression. Because once you hand over, as Priya was saying, the different ways in which labor will be utilized and the different contractual relations through which they will be deployed, will mean that there will be a depletion, further depletion in the wage share and an increase in the profit share. So in two ways, one is that you are increasing private participation in the economy from what it already was, and hence the profit shares of the private sector will increase. The second is that through further cheapening of labor, through different modes of deployment, through contracts, etc., what you will see is that the profit share will increase. So basically, it is sort of an intensified move towards moving from towards more and accrual of more profit to the corporates, which will be the basis of the accumulation regime. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chirashree. Yeah, see, you brought the whole macroeconomic situation, and in addition, you emphasized and took forward Priya's point with regard to the way labor would be treated in outsourcing models or in the contractual models. Yes, I'll give you a concrete two examples to add to your framing of the issue. Take the case of coal sector. A regular employee will get at least 40,000 or so around, and the outsourced jobs would get around 18,000 or even around that kind of thing. If you look at IPCL, when it was privatized, the non-executive workforce really paid a heavy price. Yes, more than 70% of them were laid off as far as it's concerned. Even the executives, 12% of the executives also were laid off in the privatization. And we are going to see in this monetization wage suppression directly. We are going to see, we have seen it in the case of privatization and outsourcing models, which are forms of monetization, certainly. And I think we're going to see more of wage suppression, no doubt. Layoffs we're going to see. Job growth is not going to take place. It didn't happen. In fact, we have had job loss during the period of these reforms. In fact, there is enough evidence on that. And I think, again, they're telling lies. And that's why they keep creating these imaginaries, which are really false narrative. But now, Nagal Swami ji, please.
Thank you, sir. I want to make 3 points. One is this entire national monetization pipeline is going to fail, and this recovery of rupees 6 lakh crores within the next 4 years is doubtful. Second is all the assets are aggregated, and it is going to be monetized to the corporates. Only those who are able to generate such kind of an investment only can benefit out of this monetization. There is the roads, the whole block of roads. Even for the airports, they have combined. They have, I think, even amended the provisions to say that the rates for combination of the airports can be made by the airport authority. So this is a provision where only the large corporates can participate in this monetization. The third is, as you rightly said, it is going to be a wage reduction, and private agencies always they try to reduce their expenditure, reduce their cost of operation to make maximum profit. So naturally, they will not only reduce the wages, but also they reduce the number of employees. If you take the case of transport in Tamil Nadu, government transport companies are there. They have certain norms that for each fleet, each bus, there have to be 4 or 5 employees. Whereas you look at the private operators, hardly they have 2 people. So this is going to be repeated in the monetized assets also. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nagalsamy ji. Priya? Unmute yourself.
I just have one point basically to add. That we are trying to understand the nitty-gritties of the monetization pipeline and and the various policies that are coming, and we have seen in the last couple of years alone that there have been many policy changes that has been pushed through also. And one is to look at these things individually, but the other is also to look at them in the broader framework and link it with its historical, I see them as a historical outcome of the neoliberal agenda. And specifically of looking at them within, a space where you have whether the changing of the labor norms or the farm bills that are being pushed, and a move towards a creation of oligopolies. It is not even privatization, not corporatization, but a few people who are going to have control, like what Sridhar remarked, that it is no more crony capitalism, but it's like crony politics that is happening, where the power and the need is concentrated in the hands of a few, and where the government almost acts as an agent to kind of further their profiteering. And also using in the context where in many countries there have been demands, like while the report kind of mentions a few countries, but there have also been demands of nationalization, like we have that has happened even in the UK. There have been demands to nationalize the railways, because in many countries going in a train is considered luxury. And after privatization, there have been like many accidents, and they did not invest in kind of maintenance, and which kind of had an impact on them. And today we have demands of nationalization. And during the pandemic, Spain had nationalized their hospitals, and many countries that could actually respond positively to the pandemic also were the countries which increased government spending, which kind of immediately the reaction of most of the states was to actually just, when they announced lockdown, they also announced like, the money, they just put in money, like the debate on universal UBI also came about. Like people, the increase in state spending was what kind of stabilized many of the countries, and they could take in the impact of the economy, which we failed. We did not have any kind of thought, even think about the universal basic income, or even though people demanded that right now just give people money, but of course that does not fall into the agenda of the current government. But to say that there is a shift in the global economy all the way, and hence we are doing this in order to match up, is basically another lie. Just like how the premise is wrong. So it is a political premise where that is built for excluding people, like excluding, and the impact is going to be on the most historically marginalized people. And this building of connection between rural and urban, like we know how it is, and that is not necessarily going to translate. Like there has been continuous exclusion of people, and that has increased in the recent past also. So this again, like from the thinking, like when you put it in this kind of a frame, irrespective of the nitty-gritties, I think this is something that one needs to look at it critically and oppose.
Thanks for pointing out that in other countries how the neoliberal reforms are, if not been fully reversed, there are certain areas in which there has been a reversal, no doubt about it. But in our case, a new variant of neoliberalism, neoliberal reforms is in making at the moment, and that's why our opposition. And in fact, there is evidence to the fact that private sector, in social sector, because Sharat brought this particular point, in fact, it's not cheap. It's in fact expensive, be in health or be in education. There is enough evidence on that the public health facilities are in fact cheaper to develop etc. And whatever trend we have seen over the 2000s in particular, in this particular case, which even was embraced by very many government employees because they wanted to go to all those particular facilities, it's been a very costly affair. So, and that's why reversal is taking place in different parts of the world, not only in railways, in health, etc. Everywhere this is challenged. And let me, Ramlingam Alangovanji, Comrade, Railways. Comrade Alangovan, is he here?
Yes, comrade. Yes, comrade.
Yes, comrade. You take your minute or two. If you want to add some points, please do now.
Yes, comrade. Thank you for time. Actually, I wanted to say one point. That is, railways are starved of funds, investment. For the past many years, no investment has been made in the railways. In 2012, there was a committee. That committee recommended that railways share in the national transport, of goods and national transport of passengers could be increased so as to see that the national interest is protected. For national interest, the railway share should increase. For fuel or cost, whatever it may be, there are several pollution. For so many costs, railway share should increase. So they wanted investment for 20 years, but that plan was abandoned. BJP came to power in 2014. They said 8.56 lakh crore will be invested, and the share of railway will be freight railway will be from 26 to 45%. So, goods trains, speed of goods trains is average speed of goods trains is 25 kilometers. Average speed of passenger trains is 50 kilometers. This will be increased to 50 and 80. That was the plan. But that plan also has not taken up. That investment also was failed. Again, the Nirmala Sitharaman they told 50 lakh crore will be invested in railways. Then they abandoned that point. They changed the goal. Then they brought in national infrastructure pipeline. That they wanted to invest 13.69 lakh crore in railways. That also has been abandoned. Now they say national railway plan. The national railway plan, they have told 38.5 lakh crore will be invested. And now, after so many years, what they say is they will increase the share of railway freight from 26% to 45%, 25 kilometers of goods train to 50 kilometers, and 50 kilometers to 130 kilometers. So, the aim, ideal, is the same for the past so many years, and no change in the infrastructure. So infrastructure and other things is also there. That is 1 lakh crores are needed as the CAG for renewal of assets. Track is getting overaged every year, 4,500 kilometers. Now there are 11,000 kilometers arrears. Signals are not renewed. New signals are not installed. Only 50% are renewed. So like that, bridges are overaged. So they need 1 lakh crore. So many investment is failed. If they bring in privatization, they bring in privatization at the cost of neglect of infrastructure development and augmentation, expansion. All these are neglected. So I am worried that by saying this national monetization, that and this, they are neglecting the infrastructure investment, and railway will be totally affected. It will affect the safety, safety and fast running on the affordable cost. And another thing I want to tell about the British Railway. They say 67,000 route kilometers. The next month, 67,000 route kilometers. All the track will be open for monetization, asset monetization. That means infrastructure will go to private. The British experience is, this has been dealt with by Vivek Devarai company also. 1 minute. The British Railway, they had train operating companies, 25 train operating companies, and they also had infrastructure companies, private companies. And because several accidents, they collected access charge from the train operating companies. Train operating companies failed to pay access charges, and the infrastructure company failed to renew that assets, expand the assets. So there were several accidents in railway. So where there was a great lot of pressure on the government, so they took over the infrastructure company and nationalized. Now, train operating companies also, they are facing, 25 years over. Now their coaches, rakes have become overaged. So they are unable to again reinvest. So if 5% earnings, we are not profit, we are not going to the train. They say in this situation, people also want 68% people also voted in favor of nationalization. So in this situation, if railway they have to invest, privatize 67,000 route kilometers to private people, this will be a doom to the Indian railways and Indian people. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ramalingam, Comrade Alan Govan. Now I want to come to Sharat ji, and after that we can conclude the session. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, number of points. In fact, I would like to start from where I consider public sector enterprises, especially the central public sector enterprise, as a vehicle of investment. So the government should take advantage of the presence of the public sector enterprises and boost investment, because these small things tinkering with, let us suppose, public-private partnership or securitization of assets is not going far enough. As simple as that. Now, if you look at, let us suppose, in this particular work which was produced by the Niti Aayog also, they have discussed power sector. Now, in the power sector, we will find which company lists in the top rank. It is NTPC. So in sector after sector, you will find that, well, again, there is a very significant presence of the central public sector enterprises, but well, another encouragement being given to them. And you see, when they talk of, let us suppose, privatization, I certainly don't approve of privatization. And what is this? Privatization looked at from the sales side. If I'm the owner, I'm selling, so it is, I'm privatizing. From the other side, it is acquisition. So when you discuss the forms of investment globally, you find that, well, acquisition has been a very popular form of investment, because they go for brownfield, that means existing enterprises they acquire. They don't have to seek clearance, etc., which is true for the greenfield projects. So you see, acquisitions are mergers and acquisitions have been one of the most popular forms of what you call investment being made by other companies. But today what has happened is this merger and acquisition has been left behind by joint ventures model. Now, again and again, in fact, I have been arguing that, well, if we want to increase investment in this country, we should adopt the joint venture model, which you find that in China, that is, they did in a very big way. They have already brought about a law, etc., etc. So now here in the case of India, our central public sector enterprise, which was mentioned in this report also, that if there is a dearth of, let us suppose, infrastructure companies, then the CPSEs can certainly play a very eminent role. And I don't know, so no, nothing is being discussed on those lines, which is very unfortunate. But now coming to, let us suppose, the simple points which Honorable Mr. Devasam raised, that, well, what is this 1.5 lakh crores and 6 lakh crores? So what has happened is that where there are other sources of finance, what has happened? The banks, there was a problem. In fact, maximum investment was coming from the banks. But then the economy went into decline, there was a default. Now their source of funding has dried up. Where do they go? NBFC came, there was also a problem. So that source is also gone. Now the most important avenue for investment in India for stepping up is pension funds and insurance funds. They are long-term funds and they can certainly more suitable for infrastructure. But there what is happening is that these pension and insurance bodies, they have a mandate to invest 50% of their funds into government securities. Now it becomes a macro question which has to be discussed in detail. So if the government, you see, unless it reduces this mandate to, let us suppose, less figure, these other people, infrastructure companies cannot, you see, get the funds from the pension and the insurance bodies. So that is one area where one can move forward. So this particular, 1.5 lakh crores per year is a very small amount because the target figure is 14 lakh crore. It has no meaning. And there again, as Mr. Elangovan said, you see, out of this 6 lakh crore, the maximum which they are expecting is from two sectors, railways and the NHIA. In the railways, now we have just heard the money is not coming, PPP projects are not picking up, securitization is not picking up. So you will fail, certainly fail. So this 1.5 lakh crore will not come. So this is what I feel very strongly that, well, one has to think of other avenues and think in a very macro way. Unless we do that, you see, things are not going to really be addressed as per the desired, you see, magnitude. This is how I would like to, unless there are some more questions.
No, there are questions, and Sharat, but I think we have already had an overrun of 20 minutes or more.
One point, if I can.
Yeah, please, yeah.
This question of efficient and less efficient question also came up. Now look at the Bharat Petroleum Corporation. If I am not wrong, it comes under the 500 fortune companies, and the government is wanting to sell it. There is no question of inefficiency. You see, so those particular companies which have lot of reserves, which can fetch the government lot more money, well, they are being put on sale, but this is not the right way to go.
Yeah, see, the point that where we need to close it is that they are not talking about efficiencies, but they are using the private sector efficiency, that it would allow us to then get an upfront payment because they come to secure revenue. Of course, they're going to secure revenue at our cost. Let's remember that. Private companies would be securing. And there are two ways. One is user charges, property augmentation. They would develop it in a manner that which may be even ecologically, socially unjust as far as it's concerned. This particular point can be developed, be around railways, be around roads, be around other areas as far as it's concerned. That is a question of public value, social value. See, the whole game has been nationalization of losses and privatization of profits. That's the accumulation model. Let's remember that. You and me bear the burden of losses. That's what nationalization means. That privatization of profits is they accumulate, the way suppression goes down. And our public services, our exclusions is the consequence of that. And that's happened. That's why the inequality, that's why the whole challenge, the poverty line, which used to be measured in terms of yearly calories, as far as it's concerned, at that time, people were not living in urban areas. The kind of public services that they have to access now, in terms of that, if you look at that, all the services have been privatized in social sector, in infrastructure. Now is the last thing which we are seeing it as that. This particular model is unsustainable, is unjust. It's not, and that's what this monetization is all about. In that sense, it's whatever financing model you may choose, as far as it's concerned, the failures are taking place. They have taken place. let's remember that is that whether it's discoms, whether it is in telecom, it's in all places where the private sector came in, it's finally we have to bail out. And they have taken decision merely now to reduce the, this is aggregate gross revenue fees, which was to be paid in the case of telecom, as well as the, the other cess that which was to be paid. All that is being waived now to this private sector. And who bears the burden? It's we who bear the burden. They don't even take up the universalization of services. The universal obligation is not taken up by telecom. They don't fulfill it. And so the point which is there is that this infrastructure model is also goes on the lines of exclusions which are going to take place, and it is not going in the direction of universalization. We are violating the Indian Constitution. We are violating the directive principles as well as the fundamental right. And I think the monopolies which are going to develop, that also a point which has come up. And I think People's Commission on Public Services and Public Sector, and including National Monetization Pipeline, would have to take up many of these issues, both from political point of view as well as from technical point of view. There are several economic technical points which have come up here for discussion, and I'm sure experts are going to put their mind to it. They're going to differ, they're going to diverge. But finally, we will be able to come up with an understanding that in whose interest this whole national monetization is. Is it even really going to allow the greenfield investments to come up or not, etc.? Those all points would have to be taken up. Friends, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you all the speakers in particular. Thank you all the participants who have joined us. And tomorrow again, we are meeting with the second round of where political representatives of different parties in Congress, RJD, Dr. Thomas Isaac from CPIM, all friends, and I think there are more names. All these political representatives of high stature are going to join us. Please, they are popular leaders, and I hope we would be able to discuss with them this particular whole issue. Professor Arun Kumar is there also, I think, in that particular panel, isn't so? Yeah. So thank you very much, friends. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, Ashish. Thank you, CFA. People First and CFA would continue with this particular. Thank you, Dev Sahanji. Thank you very much as well. Thank you, all the friends who joined us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we'll close it now, Ashish. We'll close it now. Thank you, Ramlingam ji, Alangovan ji. Thank you. Thank you, Nagal Swami ji. Thank you, Nagal Swami ji. Thank you, Chirashree. Thank you.